On February 14, 1993, a day that should have been filled with love instead became the date of a horrifying crime in Walton, Liverpool. 4 boys playing near the railway tracks discovered a strange blue object. As they got closer, they were shocked to realize it was the dismembered body of a child. The victim was identified as James Bulger, a boy not yet 3 years old. Just days earlier, his disappearance had thrown the whole town into turmoil with missing posters plastered everywhere. But no one could have foreseen such a tragic ending. The big question was, what had really happened to James? Was this a tragic railway accident or the sign of a horrifying crime? Today we will dive deep into this shocking British case, one that prompted 280,000 people to sign a petition demanding life imprisonment for the 2 young defendants. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel so you won't miss future videos. Thank you very much. To better understand the background of this tragedy, we need to go back to the time when James went missing. James Bulger, born on March 16, 1990, was the only child in his family raised in the utmost love and care of his parents. He was remembered for his distinctive blonde hair, bright smile, and cheerful, lovable personality. Around 3:30 p.m. on February 12, 1993, James's mother Denise took him to a shopping center. While paying at the butcher's counter, Denise was busy looking for change in her purse. In just a moment of distraction, when she looked back, James was gone. Panic rose inside her. She quickly looked around the counter, calling her son's name, but received no reply. Frantically, she ran down the aisles of the shopping center, calling James as she went. After searching everywhere without finding a trace of her son, she was nearly in despair. A shop assistant who witnessed the situation advised Denise to contact the security office for help. She rushed there stammering as she described James to the security staff. "My son's name is James. Blonde hair, wearing a blue jacket and beige pants. He's not yet 3 years old. Please help me find him." Immediately, the announcement of James Bulger's disappearance was broadcast over the shopping center's loudspeakers. Every second, every minute that passed, Denise stood anxiously, her eyes fixed on the entrance, holding on to a fragile hope. By 4:15 p.m., the announcement about James's disappearance was still being repeated regularly over the loudspeakers. Nearly an hour had passed since the boy had vanished when James's father, Ralph, rushed to the scene after receiving the terrible news. Once he understood the situation, he immediately reported it to the police. The next day, a large-scale search began. Authorities combed the street's canals near the shopping center as well as playgrounds and parks James often visited. But all efforts proved fruitless. No trace of the boy was found. Returning to the shopping center to start the investigation from scratch, police retrieved footage from the security cameras. The recording showed that at around 3:42 p.m. the previous day, James had left the shopping center with 2 boys about 10 years old. One taller boy walked ahead leading the way. The other held James's hand as they followed behind. Due to the poor image quality of the time and the angle showing only the backs of the 3, identifying the 2 boys' faces was difficult. However, based on clothing and build, police confirmed that the child being led away was James. Notably, James seemed to go along willingly with the 2 boys, creating the impression of 3 siblings out on a stroll. This detail made the case even more mysterious and complex. Failing to recognize the boys in the footage, Ralph and Denise grew even more anxious and distressed. Countless questions flooded their minds. Who were these 2 boys? Where had they taken James? Why hadn't James come home last night? Surely he would have cried out for his mother if he couldn't find her. The footage extracted from the security camera showing James walking with 2 unfamiliar boys was immediately released to the media, drawing great public attention. As the faces of the 2 boys could not be clearly seen in the video, the police could only estimate their ages to be around elementary school level. A flood of calls from the public poured into the police hotline with tips. Many reported seeing 2 teenage boys accompanied by a child matching James's description on the day he went missing. The locations mentioned were all close to the shopping center along the canal bank and on nearby streets. Some witnesses said they saw James crying, while others claimed the 2 boys were acting upon the child. However, no one could identify the boys or knew where they had taken James. The investigation reached a dead end. 2 days after James went missing on February 14th, A heartbreaking discovery was made on a stretch of railway tracks. The body of a child was found and quickly identified as James Bulger. The scene and the evidence collected immediately indicated that this was not an ordinary accident, but a serious murder case. Forensic results confirmed that James had died in the late afternoon or evening of February 12th, only a few hours after he was reported missing. The autopsy revealed severe injuries across his body, and analysis showed that the wounds were not instantly fatal. This meant the boy had endured a prolonged period of pain before his death. Confronted with this harsh reality, Mr. Ralph and Mrs. Denise were devastated. Utter grief enveloped the small family. A haunting question echoed in the hearts of every British citizen. What kind of monster could be so cruel as to harm an innocent child not even 3 years old? The whole of Britain was indignant, calling for the killer to be caught and punished appropriately. A large-scale manhunt was launched nationwide, determined to bring justice to little James and his family. Based on the images from the mall's security cameras, the police identified the 2 boys who took James as the prime suspects. They checked the list of students absent from school on February 12th at nearby schools. Several students who were absent coincided with the time of the incident were included in the list. However, after a thorough investigation, the police still did not find a specific suspect. During the investigation, the police received an anonymous tip-off accusing John Venables and Robert Thompson. Both had been absent from school on the day of the crime, and the caller claimed to have seen blue paint stains on John's jacket. However, police did not immediately focus on this lead, nor did they yet consider the 2 boys main suspects. Although John and Robert were known as mischievous children, they had no prior serious criminal records. At that time, the police still concentrated on investigating students with histories of violence or bad behavior, believing this group posed a higher risk of committing such crimes. Moreover, based on the CCTV images, the 2 boys leading James appeared to be around 13 to 14 years old, while John and Robert were only 10. This raised the question, could 2 10-year-olds truly have the motive and ability to commit such a brutal murder? However, as the investigation progressed, students with histories of violence were gradually ruled out. The focus shifted back to John and Robert. The police searched both boys' homes. At John's house, they found a jacket stained with blue paint. On Robert's shoes, they discovered traces of blood. Forensic testing showed the paint on the jacket matched that found on James, and the blood on Robert's shoes matched James's DNA. The shape of the shoe's lace hook also matched the wounds on James's face. In addition, both boys' fingerprints were found at the crime scene. Faced with irrefutable evidence on February 18th, police arrested Robert Thompson. 2 days later, John Venables was also arrested. Both were charged with the kidnapping and murder of James Bulger. Both boys, accompanied by their parents, were taken to the police station for separate interrogations. The questioning took place in a tense atmosphere and lasted for hours. The 2 boys constantly lied, denied involvement, and blamed each other. At first, John even denied being at the shopping center that day. Robert admitted being there, but insisted he had not taken James. The police used Robert's statements to confront John, and in turn used John's statements to pressure Robert. During questioning, John displayed signs of psychological instability. At times, he cried in his mother's arms, and at others, he clung to the officers, making the interrogation difficult. In contrast, Robert appeared unnervingly calm. His cold, merciless demeanor when answering questions horrified the investigators. They could hardly believe that a 10-year-old could remain so composed, showing no sign of compassion or remorse for the life he had taken. As for John, after being encouraged by his parents with the promise that no matter what he had done, they would always love him, he finally admitted to committing the crime, but shifted all the blame onto Robert. Robert, however, stubbornly denied the charges, maintaining a calm and defiant attitude in the face of every police question. The interrogation only ended after several days. Based on John Venables' testimony, the police, together with the 2 boys, retraced every location James had passed through, starting from the shopping center, reconstructing the final 2.4 kilometers of the victim's short life. On the afternoon of February 12, 1993, John and Robert, who were notorious for skipping school, were at the shopping center. At first, they only stole a few items, such as candy dolls, toys, batteries, and a can of blue paint. Then they went to a McDonald's, deliberately soiling the seats, and were asked to leave by the staff. Feeling unsatisfied, John said that he hadn't hit anyone for a long time and felt itchy hands. Robert responded with a horrifying suggestion: kidnap a child, push them into the road, and stage it as an accident. The two quickly agreed and began putting their plan into action. They targeted two children, a boy and a girl, who were inside a store. Taking advantage of the moment when their mother was shopping, they approached them. When the mother returned and couldn't see her two children, she panicked and searched frantically. The daughter was quickly found. When the mother asked, "Where's your brother?" the girl replied that he had followed a strange boy out of the store. The mother rushed outside, running and calling her son's name. From a distance, she saw John and Robert trying to lure her son away. When they noticed the mother chasing after them, John was forced to let the 2-year-old boy return to her. Fortunately, this child narrowly escaped harm. After that, John and Robert spotted James standing next to his mother at a butcher's counter. Taking advantage of the moment when his mother was picking ribs and taking out her wallet to pay, they gestured for James to come closer. Curious James approached, and John gave him a piece of candy, coaxing him with the promise of more if he followed them. John took James by the hand and walked toward the exit with Robert leading the way. Upon leaving the shopping center, James realized his mother was no longer beside him and began crying for her. John and Robert ignored him, pulling him toward the canal bank. Once there, seeing that the area was deserted, their malicious nature began to emerge. They pushed James to the ground, leaving him crying. At that moment, a woman passing by saw the 3 children and assumed they were playing, so she merely glanced at them and continued on her way. Fearing that James's crying would attract attention, John and Robert threatened him, warning that if he continued to cry, he would never see his mother again. Frightened, James stopped crying and continued following them. By now there was a bruise and a scratch on his forehead. John pulled James's hood up to cover the marks. John and Robert continued to lead James through various locations, including the Liverpool post office and a parking lot on a busy street. Some people saw James appearing cheerful at times, while others saw him looking very sad and crying for his mother. Despite James's weak resistance, John and Robert kept moving him along. When James tried to show that he did not want to go any further, Robert used force to make him comply. A woman driving a car witnessed what was happening, but unfortunately chose not to intervene quietly, pulling the curtain over her window. By late afternoon, another woman saw James sobbing and approached to ask what was wrong. John and Robert quickly made up a story claiming they had just found the boy at the bottom of a hill. Believing James was lost, the woman advised the 2 boys to take him to the nearest police station for help in finding his family. They verbally agreed, but instead led James in the opposite direction. Sadly, the first woman's initial concern did not lead to stronger action. At that moment, another woman walking her dog reassured her that she had just seen the 3 children laughing together, so there was probably nothing to worry about. This offhand remark dispelled the first woman's suspicion and tragically extinguished the last chance for James to be saved from the hands of the 2 perpetrators. John and Robert continued taking James to 2 more shops. Although the shop assistants noticed the injuries and tears on James's face and were suspicious about the relationship between the 3 children, they ultimately did not intervene. According to later investigations, as many as 38 people saw the 3 children together. This meant that James missed 38 chances to be saved, each step bringing him closer to tragedy. At around 5:30 p.m., the final destination in James's painful journey was a deserted stretch of railway tracks. It was in this desolate place that John and Robert's horrifying actions reached their peak. James continued to endure severe acts of violence as the perpetrators used objects found at the scene to attack him. These actions went far beyond what anyone could imagine from children who were only 10 years old. By 6:30 p.m., after an hour of suffering, James had died. But the cruelty of the 2 perpetrators did not end there. They coldly carried James's body onto the railway tracks with the intention of staging the scene as a tragic accident. Their plan was partially successful when a train later passed by. On November 1st, 1993, the trial of the James Bulger case officially began at the Preston Crown Court. Outside the court, around 500 protesters gathered demanding the highest sentence for the two defendants. Sitting in the dock, John and Robert still tried to justify their cruel actions. Faced with charges of murder and abduction, both pleaded not guilty. Notably, John, who had previously confessed at the police station, now changed his statement and denied the charges. Robert, on the other hand, maintained his same cold and ruthless demeanor, not shedding a single tear from the time of his arrest to his appearance in court. The press dubbed him the boy who doesn't cry. During the trial, psychological experts evaluated John and Robert, concluding that both were capable of distinguishing right from wrong and were not antisocial individuals. This proved that the two children did not commit the crime due to mental illness or intellectual disability. They were completely normal and had deliberately and cruelly taken the life of an innocent child. Since the defendants did not plead guilty, the judge could only rely on the evidence collected and the 20-hour interrogation recordings to deliver a verdict. The court declared that the two defendants had committed an extremely brutal and cruel crime with cunning and inhumane behavior. Both were convicted of kidnapping and murder with a recommended sentence of at least 8 years in prison. However, this sentence clearly could not ease the pain and anger of James's parents, nor could it calm the strong wave of public outrage. The UK newspaper The Sun launched a petition campaign attracting 280,000 signatures, calling for a harsher punishment for the two criminals. Eventually, under public pressure and the intervention of the Home Secretary, the minimum detention period was increased to 15 years. The life of an innocent child had been taken and a family would forever live in grief, yet the two murderers would serve only 15 years in prison. Many people felt this sentence was unjust, believing that justice had not been fully served. However, the story did not end there. The living conditions in prison for the two criminals were what truly outraged the public. John and Robert were held in separate secure juvenile facilities with living conditions described as almost hotel-like, even luxurious. John's cell was fully equipped with a widescreen TV, a game console, a guitar, a sound system, and even a gym. Moreover, prison officials justified that, due to signs of declining physical and mental health, John was granted certain privileges for humanitarian reasons and to prevent the risk of self-harm. During this time, both were occasionally allowed out under strict supervision. John was taken to Wales to watch a rugby match, while Robert was taken to shopping centers and cinemas. These details were already controversial, but the story went even further. At the age of 16, Robert even had a girlfriend inside the detention facility, and she was later penalized for the relationship. Notably, Robert himself admitted that his life had improved after committing the crime. Not only did they enjoy comfortable living, but John and Robert were also given educational opportunities. They received formal education in prison, and both passed their high school graduation exams. Entering prison before finishing elementary school, they had now become high school graduates. At this rate, many feared they might even earn university degrees after release. However, intervention by the European Court of Human Rights led to a reduction in their sentences. In 1999, the court ruled that John and Robert had not been given a fair trial and that the sentences should be reviewed. By the year 2000, citing good behavior and rehabilitation, the sentences of both were reduced to 8 years. In June 2001, after a hearing, the court concluded that John and Robert were no longer a threat to society, and both were released at the age of 18. To ensure the safety of John and Robert after their release, both were given new identities and lived at undisclosed locations. This decision met with fierce opposition from James's parents. Ralph demanded that the two killers be imprisoned for life. Public outrage once again erupted, with many spontaneous protests breaking out. Serving only 8 years for such a heinous crime was seen as a mockery of justice. However, due to the authority of the European Court of Human Rights, the UK government could not overturn the decision for release, despite the wishes of the people. Subsequent events proved that public fears and anger were entirely justified. It seems that once a bad seed is planted, it is very difficult to completely remove it despite rehabilitation efforts. After his release, John Venables was summoned multiple times by police for public disorder offenses and cocaine possession. In July 2010, John was sentenced to 2 years in prison for downloading and distributing illegal material involving children. He was released in May 2013. In 2018, another alarming incident occurred when John Venables was again found in possession of illegal and harmful material involving children. This led to another prison sentence of 40 months for offenses similar in nature to his previous crime. By 2020, John Venables also faced losing his driving license due to repeated legal violations. These two serious reoffenses revealed a disturbing pattern of criminal behavior showing John Venables' danger to children. This also recalls and partially sheds light on the true nature of the horrific crime he committed against James Bulger. In contrast to John Venables, Robert Thompson has had no known reoffenses after his release. However, one notable detail is that Robert publicly admitted to being homosexual. Although he had a girlfriend during his incarceration after release, Robert chose to live with a man. This could be seen as a lifestyle choice that kept Robert away from temptations and legal troubles, leading to a more peaceful life. Growing up in a family with 7 siblings, Robert faced a childhood full of hardship and deprivation. He was a victim of immoral acts from his biological father. His unstable home life was marked by frequent fights among siblings. Furthermore, the father's abandonment pushed Robert's mother into depression, substance abuse, and even suicidal thoughts. All these negative factors may have contributed to Robert's wrongful actions. Similarly to Robert, John Venables also grew up in a broken home. His mother never mentioned his father, and often had relationships with different men. This led neighbors to view her as a promiscuous woman. Looking at the family backgrounds of both John and Robert, it's clear that the risk factors pushed them closer to a life of crime. The story of John Venables and Robert Thompson is a heartbreaking example of the importance of the family environment in a child's development. As a famous saying in criminology goes, genetics loads the gun, personality aims it, and environment pulls the trigger. That is why creating a healthy living environment, including family education and society for children, is an extremely important responsibility for parents. The James Bulger case also raises questions about the responsibility of the community, when as many as 38 people saw James but none intervened strongly enough to save the boy. This case also exposes hidden flaws in the justice and rehabilitation system for juvenile offenders. Has the punishment been a sufficient deterrent? Has the rehabilitation process truly been effective? And have we done enough to protect other children from potential bad seeds?